And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. Since its founding in 2015, the focus of Nation to Nation is building long-term relationships with First Nations leaders, government officials, and industry to share their perspectives on economic development. On today's Open Connection, we'll be bringing you highlights of two industry leaders who share their perspective working in Tahltan territory.
We're a BCE company, so this is a built-in BC company, and we are focused on the business of recycling mines. So our approach to mineral development has to do with going where mineral resources have been found, where they have been extracted before, and looking at them through a new lens. Many things have changed through time, better technology, more access to infrastructure, changes in commodity prices. These things all inform these decisions, and maybe old mines are now profitable again in today's age. So that's our business model. As I mentioned, we're a made in BC company. We have been around actually for about 35 years, but just in the last 5 years, the company has gone through a renewal and a rebirth. A whole new management team brought in, and that's where we brought in this new business model of looking at previously operating mines for bringing them back on stream. Our company is predominantly BC based and managed. I think about half of our senior management team is actually from British Columbia. I myself am from the Kispiox Valley, just a little bit north and east of here. Hazelton Secondary grad, 89. Woo! A little bit more about the company. It's really grown exponentially over the last couple of years. We started off with a handful of about 5 people. We now are at around 80 full-time employees, and our field crews are, during COVID, we were running because we were part of the EMC committee group with Tahltan, and we were running, I think, 5 camps. We limited them all to 50 people for worker bubble purposes. So we're about 250 people in the field when things are really going. Our main focus is the revitalization of the Eskay Creek mine. So that's a little bit about the company. I'll talk a little bit about Eskay Creek. Eskay Creek was in production from 1994 until 2008, and when it was in production, it was the highest grade gold mine in the world at the time. They were operating in an environment where gold price was $350, $400 an ounce. It was at the time a very remote operation, completely diesel powered, and a long ways away from everything. So very different cost structure than today. Today gold prices are $1,700 an ounce, and we have hydroelectric power now within 14 kilometers of the old mine site, and we have advances in processing technology. So we saw the Eskay Creek operation as an opportunity. We had a look at it, and it is tremendously economically viable in today's markets. So right now we are what we would consider to be an advanced exploration project. We do have an existing mine site. We actually have a number of mine sites in the Skeena portfolio that are closed that we manage. Eskay is one of them, but it is the flagship project for our company. So economics on the project, just by way of a bit of background, we just released a feasibility study last week. We're looking at a net present value of about $1.4 billion, an internal rate of return of over 50%, payback period of just a little bit over a year. So it's a very, very robust project economically. So with that, our timeline, and because it is an existing mining project, our timeline here is looking at starting the early stages of construction next summer, carrying that on over a couple of years to achieve production at the end of 2025. And that's a very, very ambitious timeline. But you know, it's an existing project. It's a brownfield site. It has an access road. It's very close to green power. It has very, very robust economics. And we've been doing a lot of work over the last 5 years, actually, with the Tahltan Nation and the Tahltan Nation Development Corporation, because we started working in Tahltan territory well before the Eskay Creek project came into our portfolio.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. Skeena Resources Limited is a junior mining company focused on developing the past-producing Eskay Creek gold-silver mine located in Tahltan territory in the Golden Triangle of Northwest BC. Let us rejoin the conversation with Justin Hamelwright.
So that's our focus, and the reason why I'm up here on the stage today with Paul is to talk about, as you're moving into a project at this stage of things and we're getting ready to move into construction, what are the things that we need to do as companies and as nations to make this a successful partnership and to maximize the benefits and opportunities and to maximize the viability of the business, because those two things are reliant on each other. So what's on our mind right now? It is the construction of the project. There's a lot of things that we have to do around permitting, obviously, to move this forward. But we're really starting to think about construction, and we're really starting to think about the linkage between that and communities. Looking beyond just the aspect of signing up contracts and doing work, we need to look into the opportunity for projects like this to create what I call a sustainable ecosystem of service providers and contractors. And I want to emphasize the word sustainable, because mining has a way of doing the boom and bust thing. It's really, really busy sometimes, and it's really, really quiet sometimes, much to the detriment of the industry. So that's one challenge that we have to look at when we're talking about a sustainable ecosystem of service providers. We want to build the project on budget and on time, of course, but we also see a project like this as a vehicle for building economy, right? For creating a legacy that outlasts the mine itself, and that legacy is tied to the capacity and capabilities and the ecosystem that you create around service providers. How do we do this? I don't know. And that's part of the reason why I'm here today, is to get ideas on how to use the opportunity, the economic opportunity that we have in front of us with Eskay Creek, to create a system or a platform within Tahltan communities and within communities in the Pacific Northwest of contractors and service providers and employees that is sustainable going beyond the life of the mine. So some of the ideas that we have are things like an entrepreneurship program, so with a microcredit facility and some coordinators and guides and managers for people who want to get jobs at the mine site. They've got somebody that they can talk to. They can access credit to build their business, all these sorts of things. So that's one idea. Strategic partnerships with the DevCorp. So looking beyond just simply the process of having contracts with service providers or the DevCorp, but actually creating businesses together. So that's another idea that we're kind of playing around with. Building future leaders. So we have a mentorship program at Skeena. We have, I think it's 5 now, young Tahltan professionals who are in university or are graduates of university programs in engineering, in computer science, in finance. And, you know, the process of going through the development and construction, moving to operation of a mine is a very, very rare thing. It doesn't happen very often. I mean, we did have a very good example here in the Northwest not too long ago with Pretium and the Brucejack project. But it doesn't happen a lot. So we want to get these young people that exposure to how all of this stuff works, because going forward into the future, they will be the leaders. They will be the people who are working within the Tahltan territory with their nation to advance projects like this. So we have an opportunity to share our knowledge with them. There's obviously the contracts access one. Everybody, I think, in the room is aware and familiar with the, the whole process of preferred access to contracts and set-asides and all that sort of stuff. So those are all, those are all bread and butter tactics and techniques. But another one, as I mentioned earlier, we have to keep in mind the boom and bust cycle. So we have to be looking at those opportunities from the lens of this mine will run for X number of years, and we want those businesses and we want those service providers and contractors to be able to carry on with this business, even if it's not at our mine, right? So that's another element that we're kind of wrestling with. So why do we do this? Why is it not just straight up, look, we're going to go and get contracts and we'll get the work done on, on time and on budget, and the Tahltan Nation Development Corporation will make money off of the contracts and all this sort of stuff. So why are we thinking about this more in terms of the long-term legacy? Well, because we want to have the opportunity to do it again. There's a thing, chain of custody with these projects, and looking back over the years and realizing the history of Eskay Creek, they had a great relationship with Tahltan while it was operating the first time. And I think that the opportunities that we have and that operations like Newcrest have and others have in Tahltan territory come from the fact, in part, that there have been positive relationships in the past, and we want to see that legacy continue. So we're thinking about our operation, obviously, but we also are thinking about the sustainability of our industry. We're thinking about the sustainability of the communities around which we work. These are all really, really important factors. Part of the value system of our company is thinking about future generations. And as a kind of a local here, the Pacific Northwest is where my heart has been, and it's a kind of a personal thing, I think, for a lot of us in Skeena Resources as well as British Columbians, that we want to be able to provide prosperity for the communities where we work.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. The Nation to Nation forums will provide First Nations leaders the opportunity to outline how industry and government can help address economic, environmental, social, and Indigenous right issues while working in partnership on resource development in First Nations territories. Let us return to the conversation with CEO of Tahltan Development Corp., Paul Gunner.
One of the things going through the interview process when I was working with the board and looking at the opportunity initially, they said, what's your comfort, or how do you feel about working in remote settings? And I said, well, do you have a road? Yeah, you're not that remote, you're fine. So, that's the sort of the world that I came from. We all have our unique challenges, but, certainly some of the stuff, the infrastructure, et cetera, it's incredibly impressive, right? So I'm going to hit you with a couple of sort of key stats right now that really stands out for me, which gets me incredibly excited and what really got me interested in the opportunity in the first place. So when you look at TNDC has been operating for over 35 years. So that, the founder, Jerry Asp, who I'm sure a lot of people know here in the room, a very well-known Tahltan member, really sparked that off, and there's some incredible leaders that have come over the last 35 years to build TNDC where it is today. And where is TNDC today? Well, TNDC today is the largest Indigenous business operating in British Columbia, according to Business in Vancouver, by number of employees. So last year we had about 500 employees, I think, that went through on our payroll. Of that, about 70% were Indigenous, which I think is another really incredible statistic. We hire not just Tahltans, we hire across a large spectrum of Indigenous groups, which I think is really fantastic. Outside of that, when I first went and looked at Red Chris and walked through Red Chris on my sort of initial tour, I was blown away by the amount of TNDC that I saw floating around, whether it be on trucks, equipment, you name it, right? So TNDC is very material and instrumental in terms of the operations of say, Red Chris, or in terms of developing Eskay and with Skeena bringing up about 250 million liters of diesel for those diamond mines to operate. We live in a world of electrification here in the region, which is just an incredible opportunity. And as a result of that electrification, and we're all looking at a decarbonized world, the Brucejack mine site actually boasts the lowest GHG emissions per ounce produced in all of Canada and Australia. And that's fantastic. That is something that I think we can all celebrate, right? So when Justin mentions, Skeena and developing that, I mean, that's the opportunity that we have for these net new mines that are coming on to have those incredibly low carbon footprints. We got to look at sustainability for the TNDC and for other organizations operating in the region. But the region offers a huge amount of opportunity going forward around critical minerals. So one of the stats that I sort of came across recently, when you look at copper, which is a huge part of that critical minerals that we require for batteries, et cetera, approximately 60% of the known copper deposits are in British Columbia, of which the majority of those are in the Golden Triangle, of which Tahltan is the majority of the Golden Triangle, right? So you start to really look at the vast amount of opportunities, the capacity that we're building in TNDC, and all the electrification.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Together with its partners, Tahltan Nation Development Corp is able to support all aspects of resource and industrial development projects occurring in Tahltan territory. In this final segment of Open Connection, Paul shares what is in store for the future of TNDC.
The infrastructure that's in place, et cetera, there's a lot of upside and opportunity. But one of the things that Justin really pointed to, and certainly, again, going back to my past life, that's really important, is you can have all the opportunities in the world, you can have all the contracts and all that upside, but you have to have a vehicle that can take advantage of that and simply put, monetize it, right, and draw the value out of it, So where we're at now, and that sort of leads me to the next part of what I want to talk to with TNDC, is we're really focused on not just executing, but now building sort of the system, the capacity, and building on that beautiful foundation that TNDC has over the last 35 years. And I call it some of that stuff, the non-sexy stuff, to be honest with you, right? So we've brought in a CFO, and we're very fortunate, Anna May, who's worked with us at Tahltan Show in the past and went through some of this process that we've gone through. But robust budgeting, moving from a review to an audit process, right? So really bulletproofing that financial piece. Bringing in human resource information systems that we can really drill down on the HR side and build some of that baseline measures out. Why is that important? Well, if we want to grow and develop, we need to have access to capital, right? In order to access capital, we've got to give the confidence to the lending institutions that we've got the ability to sort of manage and work through from that financial piece, right? We got some great feedback just recently. So the annual report, it's right here. So if anybody wants one, just come see me and I'll email you one, but I think there's a link there as well in the agenda. We were going through and looking at financing options, and one of the financial institutions we met with, looked at that annual report and said, this gives us a lot of confidence that, you understand the business and looking through all of that. That stuff, it counts, it matters, right? So we're developing that and bringing more of that to the forefront. On the HR side, it's not just about making money in these development corporations. That's what personally really attracts me to this world. It's about also that social license. It's about developing our people, bringing forward and creating the employment piece, but even more importantly than that, it's going forward and creating and working people up into more progressive type roles. Justin talked about having six roles, Tahltan specific. We've started now working in multiple working groups with some of our key partners like the Procons of the world, Sodexo, et cetera, and where we've got working groups identifying leadership opportunities, training and development, apprenticeships, et cetera, bringing that directly back into TNDC itself. I was just on an email chain this morning where we've got a young Tahltan member that's going to be progressing forward with an apprenticeship, I believe heavy-duty mechanic, and a really neat one that sort of popped up with another partner of ours, Barminco, and I believe we stole this one from Skeena, but a young Tahltan that had an engineering degree, had the opportunity now to go work with Barminco that's developing that block cave mining that Ben talked about earlier, And I believe he's going to get shipped off to Australia here for a couple of years and get that next generation technology that he can then bring back to Canada and really advance his career. Justin also talked about, okay, you know, we've got, things are good right now, we know that. Yes, we've got a bit of an economic low point right now that we're dealing with, but that's sort of short term, we feel, and we've got opportunities in the region. But there's things called risk, right? And when you look at development corporations like TNDC or Tahltan show that I came from, you know, the two largest risks that generally occur is what they call sectoral, which is the mining space, so up and down, and then geographic, right? You're very centered within the region, your traditional area. So that's an area that, you know, going forward, we've got to be looking at those opportunities. How do we then expand on that, right? So when I look back in my first development corporation I was with, it was a company called Dakota Capital Investments in Yukon. We didn't have any IBAs. So in that world, we went out and we acquired companies and deployed capital and built them up over time, in some cases 100% owned or partially owned. And we'd work under things like government contracts, et cetera, but we'd be going out and competing within that private sector piece. And that was a really important, you know, we were confined in that case to the Yukon, and we did have operations in Alaska, but we didn't have that sort of opportunity around those IBAs. So now with TNDC, as we build those systems and mature that out, get that costing piece in, future-proof the corporation, that next sort of step is then looking at opportunities that may exist to work outside the traditional territory. And the demand and opportunity is there. So I've got a really good opportunity sitting on Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business, CCAB board, and what we hear through that at a national level, the interest and opportunities for Indigenous corporations across the Canada for the TNDCs of the world to take advantage of is vast, right? So we know the opportunity is there. It's working with the Skeena resources, it's working with the Newcrest, helping build that capacity, building up our people, and then leapfrogging forward in the future. Not getting ahead of ourselves and managing within that risk, but the future is very bright around some of that. The one thing I want to leave you with, and then I talk about a lot of this in our talks, is some of the just the exposure I had when I was in Alaska and looking at some of those Indigenous corporations there. When you look at Alaska, the 10 largest private businesses in Alaska, 9 of them are Indigenous. And the 3 largest did over $1 billion last year. And they've scaled now across the lower 48. Some of them gone international, but they've really leveraged opportunities like federal contracting. So we now have 5% in Canada of contract under federal goes to Indigenous. So those opportunities are really starting to exist. So we can look at places like Alaska and some of the other bright spots here in Canada, really leverage some of that stuff. We know we can do it. But again, it comes back to that holistic piece, the stakeholders, taking advantage of that, continuing to build out the infrastructure like the fiber optics that we've got constructing today, the airport, et cetera, and all that comes together and we can move forward for multi-generational opportunities.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our mastery within. I'm Robert Pictou.